Hello and welcome to a really exciting Pilates Hour. I have a very dear friend, and we've known each other for decades on decades, probably more decades than we want to admit, but in the Pilates world, in the education world, and in the disruption world. So this is going to be a wonderful hour of hopefully, if we do our job right, Madeline, of disruption. And what we mean by that is that we really want to make sure that everybody's having an experience where it opens your mind and to understand that things are not as fixed as we've been taught. And we'll move through that. What I'd love for you to do as I start introducing Madeline is just to do a quick shout out and let us know where you're joining us from today. Great to have you on. We have a record event today. We're over 3,400 registered, so that's a record for us, and that's probably thanks to having Madeline Black, and some of you have asked for Madeline to be on the Pilates Hour. So Madeline, thank you for accepting and joining us. Good to have you.
Thanks for inviting me. It's been fun, even preparing.
I think that's sometimes the most fun. So we've had some very good discussions leading up to this, and just, there's so much good information, right, Madeline, that's just coming out, and to me, it's mind-blowing, and I hope that's what you feel today. I hope everybody in this discussion feels challenged, as we do, with just trying to process new information and new ways of thinking about movement, and that's why we called it the dialogue of movement. Introducing Madeline. Madeline's been around teaching for a long time and is a great thought leader. I have a book, and she told me that there's now a second edition out, which scares me because I'm already working on the second edition of my book that just comes out this summer. But this is a great book, centered, and we'll put it into the post-production, but really understanding, again, looking at movement and movement theory. And as we were joking before, Madeline and I were saying, here we put all this effort and it takes years to produce a book. And immediately while we're finishing up the book, we realize, there's so much new stuff and so many things changing. Madeline, share with everybody a little bit about what you're excited about these days, sort of what you're studying and what you're looking at, what you're teaching. I know you're joining us from Mexico. That's a new thing for you.
Yes, I'm in
cool.
Mexico right now. I moved down here part-time. So,
awesome.
COVID was a real shift, right? I mean, for everyone. And for me, it kind of led me down the path of, I'm not going to say early retirement or not early. I could retire my age, but, it was a big, massive shift, So, and because of that, and then working on the second edition, which I had started before COVID, and then COVID happened and I cranked it out, and then, so that was busy. And at the same time, because of my change of work, I had the time to do more writing and research and reading and exploring and processing for myself. So and I've been also for the last 5 years, so that's 3 of them being in COVID, with Elizabeth Larkham, and she and I are just finished the manuscript. Actually, it's gone to the copy editor. Our Pilates, I know, it's called Pilates Applications for Health Conditions, and we got, I think it's 25 of people that most of you will know as teachers to do a case report on different health conditions. But in editing the book, it really made us look at language and it made me really see an overview of how people were thinking, right? What their language was, how do you, because you're writing, you're not just showing someone movement, you're actually writing language down. And then you read it, and I'm the one who had to go, what are they doing? What is that,
What does that mean?
Or what does that mean? What are you trying, so on and so forth. So Elizabeth and I actually really got into a lot about language, which led me down the rabbit hole of really exploring more. And of course, prior to that, people already do know that. I mean, I'm like most Pilates people, right? Just love to get new information and to learn and be exposed. And, so I do feel that there's a lot of, and I don't know if I want to say new science. You say that, Brent. I don't know if it's new. It's like building on top of
evolving,
things.
Evolving
so
science.
I don't know. I always have trouble. So we talk about language as saying this is new. Well, I don't know if it's really new. So that's another whole language thing. So, it's bringing in and making teachers. So when you ask me which I like to talk about, I'm like, let's talk about what we're thinking, what's our language around movement, and what are we basing it on? What kind of historical foundation? I'm really talking about biomechanics and the biotensegrity, biomechanics. What is our belief system around that, right? So my mind goes to, okay, we have this belief system. Where did it come from? Where did it come from? So this is what I've really been exploring and researching and, kind of been interested in. I don't want to take away our entry here, but it's,
No, it's great because that's what we talked about. We want to talk about language.
yeah,
We want to talk about the evolution of what many of us consider as being, oh, this is the science of movement. This is biomechanics. This is kinesiology. This is the physics of movement. And the reality is, there's this evolution that's continuing to help us understand. And I remember about 3 years ago, I started teaching the physiology course at the physical therapy school. And, they asked me to teach the muscle physiology and getting into it. And of course, I'd had all that influence from Dr. Carol Davis and a lot of the new research coming out that Elizabeth's been involved in, and the different folks in Europe that are doing such great work in Italy and Germany on fascia. And really, you talk about evolving science. I mean, you think in the last 10 years, the evolution of what has come forth is pretty amazing. But I remember looking at that and looking at the muscle filament theory that I learned, 40 years ago, and thinking that, wow, it is so different for us, the way we understand, movement and motion and tension and compression. These are some of the things we're going to be talking about today, is that evolution over time. And I appreciate the correction on the vocabulary because it is not new science. We're still talking about biomechanics. We're still talking about movement.
Yeah, I mean, I was with Carol, Dr. Carol Davis in, Dundee in Scotland. We were sitting in a lecture, and throughout the lecture, there was this whole discussion, about that muscle tissue and contractiles and the fascia and all of that, right? And so at one point, it popped into my head. And I turned to Carol because I was sitting right next to her, and I whispered to her, and I said, oh my God, that means, is there no concentric and eccentric contraction? Is that what he's saying? And she looked at me with her eyes like, right? Can you imagine now? All these years, everyone's
shortening and lengthening of muscle. Yeah.
It's like, is it really doing that? How do we really know that? You see, so it's questioning that. So then you have to go further and look at that. Biomechanics, is it's mechanistic, right? So the anatomists, really wanted to dissect, right? They wanted to be able to, let's look at the knee. I mean, we have to do this kind of thing. Like I always call it that Google thing. Like you zoom in, you look at it, but then you have to zoom out and look at the whole holistic picture.
The relationships, right? And everything.
But it's even, that's where biomechanics, it's mechanic is the word, which is why, it's different from biotensegrity. There's a yoga teacher you asked me earlier, Joanne Son, I think is how you pronounce her name. She calls it biomovement. That's her language. So not biomechanics, but calling it biomovement. That's something she created, which I think is interesting language. Am I going to use it? I don't know, but I do find it interesting.
Well, it's like we're looking in the idea that, in movement, especially movement that has derivatives from yoga and Ayurveda, or movement that has derivatives from, looking at child growth and development. We don't teach children to move that are healthy children. They learn to move based on their desires to participate, the tasks they want to do. And yet when somebody gets hurt, we go back to some of these older models of, I'm going to teach you how to do a quadricep contraction. I'm going to teach you how to do a hip abduction strengthening. And rather than looking at it a little bit differently, of thinking like, well, how would a child learn how to do side-to-side stepping? And because they're playing a game, right? How do they learn how to do it? And their body responds spontaneously to the learning. And as we do it more and more, it becomes more efficient and more energy conserving. And so I thought, before we jump into the history, I would love, you quoted something that was just mind-blowing. I'd like to quote it at the beginning of the discussion and then quote it again at the end of the discussion. Is that okay?
Totally.
Okay, good. Because this is a mind-blowing. Get ready, guys. Put your
It's a
hats on.
quote. It's from John Sharkey, who some of you may know his name. He's actually Irish, but he runs the anatomy and biotensecurity lab in Dundee. And John travels even the United States and teaches and lectures. And you could search him out. Okay, so here's the quote from John Sharkey. The language of biotensecurity is the language of soft matter physics. So I'm just going to interject here. Biomechanics is hard, right? It's metal, it's a machine. So you think of it that way. So biotensecurity is yeah, exactly. Biotensecurity is the language of soft matter physics. It is tension and compression with continuity. The premise of biotensecurity is nonlinear, continuous matter that is self-generated, self-organizing, self-stressing, hierarchical, load distributing, and low energy consuming. And there are no shear moments. There are no shear moments, no bending moments, no levers, and no joints. Yeah. I didn't read that very well, but I'll read it again better next time.
That's, oh my gosh.
There's no shear. So that's the whole thing. We think about our spine shearing. There's a shear, or bending. There's no bending. It's more of like a geometry change. It's like a shape shift change. It's where you distribute your weight. Like I'm sitting here on a yoga block. See, I'm just sitting here. And I can feel that I'm always a little bit heavier on my left than right. I load my left. It's just the way the way I am. But I can now, if I shift my weight more onto my left sit bone, I go into a lateral flexion, what we would say lateral flexion. I don't know if you can see me very well.
Yeah, but I'm doing it at the same time with you.
I mean, yeah, you can do it with me, so it's like if I sit like this, see, now I've just put my weight, now my camera is the opposite. I'm on my left sit bone, but it looks like I'm going right on the screen. But, I put my weight here. I'm not doing anything up here. I'm not bending. I mean, I could do that too, but if I shift my ribs over, my weight goes over to my right sit bone, more so. But it's where you distribute the weight. So as soon as I'm sitting on my sit bone, so that's where my weight is. And now you can see my entire shape of my body has changed, right? So it's how you load. And now what it is I'm organizing around that load in gravity. The whole body is doing that. Yeah, so is it my glute medius on my left? Is it that? Is it my oblique sling, my sling system? Ooh-wee. Is that in your book, Brent? Sling system?
There are slings in the book, yeah.
Ouch. Can I help you with your second edition?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. It's a light. It's a light thing.
You asked me what I'm doing now. I've been in hibernation. People you haven't seen me out there really. I'm not out there teaching and stuff.
We brought you back out.
In this whole it's exciting to me though. I really I'm digging it. So anyway, yeah, no more slings, everyone. Okay.
Yeah, slings were carved.
Everything was carved, but that's where we were talking about models earlier. With your helper there.
So we have a quote. Right. So Stephen Farron, who is on the back end of the Pilates Hour with Melissa Pareda, came up with a quote earlier today that was from, I want to say, George Box. George Box. He was a British statistician, and he said, "All models are wrong. Some are useful." So that's a great place for us to start, because we're going to jump into the history. And Madeline did a beautiful job of just doing a little dive into history of looking at, hey, look, where do our beliefs of movement and biomechanics come from? And I think we
were talking about the culture. To me, it's a culture of movement. We are living in a culture of movement, the culture of Pilates movement, or the culture of yoga movement, or the whatever you want to call it, right? But we have a culture, and so it's looking in that. All right. So did Joseph Pilates start that culture in our history? Maybe not. He was influenced. Whatever. We don't have to go down that road. But I started.
What did he call him? What did he call himself? What did he call himself? Something physical culturist, or?
Oh, did he call himself that? I think you're right. Actually, I think you're
something.
Right.
But it was a culturist. Right. Like, that was such a weird word, but I mean, with the way you're saying it, it makes incredible sense.
And that culture has belief systems, right? So we're in a culture, there's strong belief systems. We believe it because we're in that culture. And then you go to a different culture And there's a whole nother set of belief systems.
Right.
And then you have to
Right.
look at that and go, wow, that is so interesting that this is what their belief system is. You can think of religion, right, as an example, or politics.
Politics, yeah.
What's the belief? I believe this. Even
Education,
health, right?
education, health, all
Even the
built on belief
doctors have their
systems.
strong belief systems. I asked
Yeah.
a doctor once about my mother, about a certain drug they had her on, and so on and so forth. And I said, I've been told that it hasn't been proven that this drug does that, and she's on this drug. Is that really true? I've seen no research. And he said, that is true. We just believe it does that.
Yeah, I just
A
went through
doctor
that with
said
my
that.
parents.
So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like that was his belief system. So if you follow that belief system, then you're going to follow those rules and take that drug, which is not good for you.
There were a couple questions on slings, and what I want to just preface everybody on is the idea that our goal today is to push all of us, including ourselves, out of our comfort zone, out of our cultural beliefs, and just for a second to open your minds and think about, where do these beliefs come from? And I think the quote that Stephen gave us in the beginning is perfect for us to realize, everything that we believe is built on models. It's human thinking of trying to explain why something works, and we create models. We do this all the time. And the idea is some of these models can be really useful. So like the model of the slings, a couple questions here on slings. Mm-hmm. The model slings has been very useful for us to get out of the idea of thinking that everything is a single muscle contraction or something like that. But even the people that were doing the sling education and dissections now, you look at that evolution over the last 10 years, and it's gone, light years ahead of this tensegrity model, and looking at how, and again, we use the word tensegrity model, right? But the tensegrity of how tissues respond to load, and how the dynamicness of whole body movement and those kind of things that are happening. It's not going to be specifically on a sling or specifically in the angle of a muscle.
So I started thinking, like, how did biomechanics start? Like, who started it? All right. So the first I could research was, back, there really were philosophers. So look at the dates, BC time. That's a long time ago, right? So they were just interested about human nature, right? So it's like philosophy brings you into, mathematics. So now Plato, he starts doing math, right? So then now it's like, so this is where biomechanics, it's like Plato time, right? And then you have the father of kinesiology, Aristotle, and he studied animals and geometric. So I think that's cool. Like, he was in the geometry of movement. So that's what we're trying to going back to in a sense. And then it gets into this. I love this. I don't know how you pronounce it. It's Archimedes. I don't know.
Archimedes.
Archimedes.
Yeah.
You studied Latin. I didn't, which is a shame. But he basically.
You're studying all the Latin philosophers, so that's the important part.
Yeah. But he discovered the center of gravity and swimming, and that the human body can float. I mean, these are all cool things. And now comes Galen, okay? Now this guy wrote the first textbook, which was the basis of all medical books, is what I read. And he was the one. But the problem was he only dissected animals, because at that time it was wrong, to do a human. I don't think they did animals. So he wrote all this anatomy, wrote the first textbook on kinesiology. Medical books were based on this guy's work, and it was incorrect. The human body was incorrect. But everybody based their belief and all of that. So anyway, next, you can go to the next timeline. And then, it progresses. And then we have, so now there's a jump. Oh, and I have to mention, after I did the list, I realized there were no women on the list. So I had to go back and be like, come on, where's the women anatomists here? So I came up with this.
Just because of culture, women were probably doing all of the work, and men were taking credit for it.
A lot of, especially this woman here, Alessandra, I don't know, Giuliani, Italian, Lisa Leader, my friend, I see she's here. She can help pronounce it.
Yeah.
So she was the first woman anatomist recorded in history. She published a book, and she invented how to inject colored dye into tissue so you could see them. I mean, that's pretty significant, But if you think about it, look at the dates. I mean, we're talking 1,200 years later before we even see any sign of a woman. And yeah, there were other women helping the husbands in the dissection in the lab.
And this is it's a millennium after Galen.
Yeah,
And it's 1,000 years.
Believe me, there was probably some other women in there. It's just there's no record. There's no record, right? So then you have Leonardo da Vinci, famous, right? So he was the one who started analyzing muscle forces, right? And then the origins and insertions. So here we go. So Leonardo, can we see his picture? Right? So we're all familiar with these images. Yeah. He has a lot of incredible muscle images too, if you Google it. But he was the one who really started figuring out origin insertions, which now we know really don't exist. There's no origin and insertion on muscles. Can you believe it? We spent all this brain power memorizing every freaking muscle. Origin insertion, it's not really true. Anyway, so we can go back to the timeline. Yeah, and then came, I knew I was going to say it, Vesalius.
Am
I saying that right?
Yeah,
okay.
It's fine.
Vesalius. Okay, so he's one of the first people to actually get the human bodies and dissect it and figured out that Galen was all wrong. And I read about him, and he actually had a lot of problems going against the belief systems of prior, think about it, 1,200 years or something or more. That this is in all the medical books. You were talking about universities today not wanting to change their textbooks, so they're still going to test the PTs or people taking anatomy in college with origin. Gray's Anatomy, exactly.
1920.
So, yeah, so he debunked. So he did rise to the top because he had real human bodies, and then it's really the idea of how the whole universe influences anatomy and physiology and movement, right? So even the stars and the heavenly spheres, right? Because that developed when you look at patterns, right? And shapes of the stars, also comes into play with biomechanics and how the earth moves, plays in with the human body as well. So, and I didn't know this about Galileo, that he actually analyzed bone strength. Yeah. I mean, we know him as, the star man, but bone strength and shape, and the shape, how it's induced by increase of weight. So here's load. He's got load going here, right? So I thought that was super interesting. Okay, next timeline. So, and then we get into...
There's some great artwork by Danny, let's say his name is Wilton. We couldn't use his artwork on the show, but if you get a chance to look up Danny Wilton's art, I think you're talking about the geometry, just beautiful of looking at the spherical and geometric things that happen in our bodies. And you'd start looking at the lines and analyzing the lines, and all of a sudden you're just floored by thinking, oh, that's like, swinging at a volleyball or feeding yourselves or putting your shoes on, like these just beautiful geometry of how our bodies move, wholly moving through space, just beautiful things.
Okay, so do we have to talk about Newton's laws?
We don't have to do that today, but I think we just want to be aware that 90% of our physics today still revolves around
See, that's the point. Exactly. I know. But here's another woman. I have to bring her out here. So in Bologna, in this period of time, the 1700s, that city, I guess you would call it, really promoted a lot of research and anatomists and dissection, because they wanted to bring Bologna up in status, in terms of, the education and so this woman, I love this, because prior to the 1700s, all men doing the dissection were focused on the women's reproduction parts and uterus and all of that. They didn't look at the male. They didn't want to dissect their own stuff, I think.
Or we're just more interested in the other stuff, maybe. I don't know.
I think so, maybe. Anyway, but she's the one who really brought in a new understanding of the male body and developed techniques for examining, organs. And I think it's remarkable that she discovered the oblique eye muscle attachment, right, as well as the maxillary bone. I mean, she ran against all other anatomical experts at the time. And she also created these wax sculptures, which if anybody goes to Bologna or Florence, there's a couple of really great museums where you can see these sculptures, these anatomy. They're really incredible. But anyway, I just wanted to honor her, because if you Google, like I did the first time, there's not a single woman. I had to actually type in women anatomists in order to get it up. So anyway, next one. And then now we have the pioneering of photography, right? And the study of human movement. Now it's different. So now we're not dissecting and trying to look at stuff, but Muirbridge brought us to the idea of actually filming, so you can actually now analyze movement without cutting someone up, right? So we have this little movie. I mean, everyone's, I think, familiar with some of his images, which is animated here. All right, so as we're watching the guy gait, he's got a good heel strike, kind of rolls through his foot. He's got a good hip extension on that right leg, right?
That's what
I would say his thoracic rotation is not great, especially to the right. He has a little bit, you can see, to the left, but not so great to the right. So that would be my assessment of his gait. Yeah. Anyway, so that's remarkable. Okay. So back to the timeline. Yeah. So
I mean, can you imagine just the first time that you could slow down movement to be able to sort of pick it apart? I mean, it had to have been just an amazing experience.
Yeah. So, and now we're getting into things like embryology. So that's not till the 16, I guess my dates are off here. He had 16, should have been earlier. And then here's two more women. I just threw them in. This one woman was they became neuroanatomists now. So early 1900s, right? Into,
she was 100 years old.
Yeah. Dr. Crosby, if she was a doctor, I don't know. She lived 100 years, American neuroanatomist. So I just think it's fascinating did we skip an image? Oh, Vesuvius. We forgot about him.
Oh, Vesuvius.
Vesuvius, yeah. So I think a lot of you are familiar with he was very dramatic, right? I mean, he did these dissections, and I don't know who the artist was. I don't know if he drew these, but he's got an amazing body of work to look at in terms of his imagery.
That is beautiful.
Yeah. So when we look at that history, we can kind of see how things were pulled in and what the belief systems and where research started to come into play, in the 1900s, right? Through that. So a lot of white men, just having to say.
Well, things were happening in India and China as well that had a lot of, very different belief and very different culture of movement and human behavior. But these things were existing for millennium as well.
Right.
I mean, eventually it'd be interesting to sort of look at some of their timelines as well and look at, their discovery. And thinking of, Stephen had mentioned something we were talking earlier about sort of this, seeing the Eastern and Western philosophies and culture and beliefs of movement sort of melding together now, of thinking of, why does acupuncture work? Well, if you were basing acupuncture on anatomy 50 years ago, it made zero sense. Like they're not hitting a nerve, they're not hitting it's like, what is this happening? And then there was all the trigger point that also didn't make sense, but we saw that it worked, and so looking at these relationships now and coming back and the evolution of just fascial science and looking at how our body communicates, how our body moves, how all the organs and everything is fascia. Everything's connected, and everything has intelligence. So it's like that collective, and that's sort of where we want to go now, is talking a little bit about what are some of these evolutions that you're seeing, some of the things that have come up that fall in line. I think we're all in a place now where we can agree that we can open our mind and say that, okay, these were things that we were trained in. These were things that we were, we based our movement science on. Where are we going now? So let's talk about that.
Where we're going is that if we're moving away from a linear mechanics, which I'm hoping we are. I mean, I even editing this book, this health conditions book, it just is remarkable to me, the language. That's what made me go, wow, this is what we're believing. This is what we're teaching people.
Flexion, extension,
and it's not a matter of that's real. I mean, or true. That doctor who told me he just believed that the medical community believes that drug did what it said it did, but they don't have any proof that it does. He also said to me, first of all, he was Indian. I love this guy. actually, this doctor was great, Indian cardiologist. And he said to me, he goes, but there really are only two truths that we really know. He says, you're born and you die. I said, oh, thanks. That's very helpful. Anyway, so if we're talking about no levers or, what about, this is what was part of our conversation, right? Is, well, what about this open chain, right? So keep yourself stable, like leg circle. I'm thinking leg circle on the mat, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you lie down and you flex your hip, right? You're actually flex your acetabular-femoral joint without changing the pelvis orientation. So it's a pelvic-femoral, well, actually it's a femur on pelvis movement. That's my language.
Coxofemoral.
So it's a
femorocoxal. Femoral coxal.
No.
We can make up our own language on that. Femoral moving on coxal.
Yeah, but it's, yeah. Well, to me, it's easier to say femur on pelvis in the joint. But, it's not really, if you think open chain, that's more of a mechanical way of looking at it in a reductionist point of view, where nothing's moving, but only the leg. Okay. But as soon as you so if you're sitting or standing, whatever, just pause for a second. All right. And then all I want you to do is, wherever you are at, take your right index finger and start doing a little circle with your index finger. So I'm doing this, right? But my hand's on I'm just resting. I don't even have to rest my hand. I could do it like this.
Mm-hmm.
Now feel what your whole body's doing while you're doing this. Now you can't see me. I'm not like doing this kind of thing with it, but I can feel that as my finger goes down, I do feel load transfer, even though it's my finger. Now, if I put a weight on my finger, I'd feel it more, but I can feel a change in my whole body kind of going down with it, right? And then when I go out to the side, there's a shift. So it's not like you're never perfectly still. So there is no like, I'm isolating the leg from the pelvis. It's really not possible to do that. The whole body moves. There's a good book called Everything Moves. I think that's what it's called. But, so that with the leg circle, the term really, if you want to think of the geometric forces, okay, of the body, it's a closed kinematic chain. It is a chain of effect. It's an effect. My finger circling is a chain of effect, that's moving through my whole body, and I'm having to adapt. I'm going to self-organize myself around doing this movement with my finger. And certainly it changes once I do this, right? I'm self-organizing differently, through my body. But, and that's not a longer lever. It's a change of my shape of my body, the geometric shape. And therefore, what's happening? Well, the way my body's responding, Brent, if you did the same movement like this as I did here with my arm, it would be different for you.
Yeah, and
right.
this ties in, Madeline, to even like the big gestalt of going from everything being reflexive in neuroscience to systems theory, right? So thinking that we don't even understand what all, it's like, for example, we know we have a pattern. Like if you want to sign your name in a little tiny pad of paper, you could do it like this and have this signature that looks like your signature. You could do it on a chalkboard. You could do it with your left hand. You could do it with your whole arm, like you're painting on a building. Completely different organizations of movement, completely different. And yet your signature is going to have an appearance of being similar, whether you did it with, a paintbrush coming out your backside or your arm or a pen or your left hand. It's amazing at the similarity. There is a pattern. And that's what you're saying is here's a little pattern. Right? But how do you know that pattern organized this way? I mean, you can't compare the neuromuscular organization one to another, but the movement has the same pattern. It has the same, and I think that's where the evolution of the science is helping us.
I'm sorry. Are you talking about like you have a preference in your pattern, in your movement? Are you saying that like,
or maybe an understanding of it or an interpretation of it? I think sometimes that's what we teach is we teach opportunities to shift the understanding of, what that movement could be or what that potential is. But my point in line with what you're saying is, from a neuroscience standpoint of movement, the systems theory was sort of like with, his name just slipped me. just sort of blew everything away, because it was like realizing it was not a central command to make something happen or to something to move, right? That there are so many factors like energy expenditure and load and gravity in the world, and your orientation to gravity, so many other factors, and what you desire to do. And so all of those, and yet the body responds incredibly well to the intention of that movement, right? And that's why a lot of times when we can even have people in their mind think of what that movement might look like and then go do it, right? Mm-hmm. And it's interesting to see they have no understanding of, oh, this is what my core is doing. This is what my hip muscles are doing. This is what my joints are doing. This is what my levers are doing. They have no idea of that. That's not really part of that design of that movement.
Yeah, but people today, I mean, that's true, but you hear a lot, like we talk about language. If someone says, oh, you teach Pilates, that's all those core exercises, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that drives me insane.
Yeah, everybody knows on this particular show that's like a bad word.
Yeah, but that's the culture. I mean, so then in America anyway, I mean, I'm sure in some other countries, but maybe not in others, but, it's that whole like, oh, it's still, even back 40 years ago, it's that flat stomach, tight buns kind of thing,
Do you remember?
To me, that's the core thing. Here's
a good one. Do you remember that Time magazine article that came out? I'm not going to say who it was in there, but the whole thing was like, I could eat my chocolate cake and look like this. And it was, a skinny dancer on the trapeze table. And it was amazing. This back probably in the early 90s, I would imagine. But it was just like the first time we really got publicity in a national magazine. Mm-hmm. And it was all the wrong messaging. It was like you can have flat, flat abs, tight triceps, and you can eat your chocolate cake. So that's not true.
But that's the whole point of the language, and then understanding what. So when you go back to more of the neurology of it, it's more than just the response. It's more than just the reflex. Mm-hmm. Also, but it's just understanding that there is really no stability as people think. Like I'm saying things because it's how I taught. I said these things. I said these things.
Yeah.
25, 30 years ago. I have a videotape I just found of, I've been doing some archiving, and I found all the little old tapes. And I used to set up a camera in my studio in San Francisco. And we're talking what year would that have been? It might have been 90s. Like, my son was born, so probably like 96. And I have a whole recording of an entire teacher training in the studio I used to have in San Francisco. And I was watching who's present in the room, which was pretty cool, who was present as being trained by me back then. And then listening to what I was saying. Oh, it's like that book. It's like, wow.
Did I really say that? Pull the belly to navel, hollow the abdominals, draw in those thighs, squeeze those glutes.
So I think, just to make people know that, I mean, the language has changed from back then, but the language that we're using today needs to change even more. We need to go more with that change of what that is. And I think you'll see it in the Pilates Health Conditions book, what we've done. I hope the authors who contributed their chapters are not going to know how much we changed the language. But what their program is intact, I'll just say what they did.
Well, and I think this is interesting, Madeline, is also looking, I mean, there's a great question that is up on the Q&A right now. And Hannah's asking, okay, if you're going to teach an introductory anatomy course at a university, what text are you going to use, or what model are you going to use teaching your anatomy? And, what a great question. I mean, we're still using, believe it or not.
I would say check out the Handspring Publishing books, because they come out with really.
They're supporting all the good
There's some amazing books, and the universities needs to kind of shift to those books, really. Yeah. A number of authors.
And I can tell you where the resistance is coming from, and it's tied again into what Madeline was talking about with belief and culture. All of the examinations and all of the standardized qualifications are being based off of anatomy books that were written in the 20s and 40s. Gray's Anatomy still is considered to be the Bible of gross anatomy. And yet we're having all this disruptive discovery and discussion and the books that are being produced and published over the last 10 years or so that have really been disruptors of what our model and culture has been for that. So it'll be interesting to see how universities adapt, how medicine adapts to some of this new information. And let's go a little bit, Madeline, now into, we've talked a little bit about closed and open chain and sort of the idea that sort of falls more in line with the old biomechanical model. Let's talk a little bit about just sort of your understanding from a lot of the work you've done in the fascial conferences, the evolution of how we talk about fascia, how we talk about tensegrity, how we talk about whole body movement and not isolated movement, some of that language. So maybe we could go there the last 10 minutes or so, and I think we'll do that quote one more time at the end. And I'm just super stimulated
I would
right
recommend,
now.
if there's the whole biotensecurity culture of people. All right. So you could go onto YouTube and Google it. And there are the main, first of all, biotensecurity was really, it's about principles. And it was established by Dr. Stephen Levin. And then from there, there's some just really interesting talks, all on YouTube, all free. So I would really recommend starting there and listening to some of that. And then a various...
Buy yourself a model and play with it a little bit, because that also... Just the first time
those models, though, are not biology. You know what I mean?
They're totally not biology.
Strings, but it doesn't give you the sense of the soft matter that John Sharkey's talking about.
It gives you a better sense than the mechanical model, though. It does. It is a nice transition.
It does. I've used it for clients to get them to say, well, you're going to do chest expansion, right? So, you're kneeling and, you're going to pull back. And then I say, but you have to think about your whole body. And then I take that out. And I'm like, so when you pull your arms back, this is happening. And then when your arms come back, this is happening, meaning I'm twisting the model. I don't have a model in my hand, but
I left my model in my office.
Then I show them that, so they get a sense that they are doing chest expansion and not thinking about bracing, their abdominals in, and then just isolating their arms and trying not to move just, the carriage and just move that and, this kind of thing. But when they really get an embodied feeling from head to tail to fingertips to toes, and the sense that they think of their whole body as a geometric, and it's changing as they pull back, and then as they bring it forward back, how that all changes, and the weight. And I draw their attention to where they're feeling the load. So if you're kneeling, because that's your ground, right? Because you're not on your feet, you're on your knees and your shins and the tops of your feet. Okay, so that's where you feel where's the load shifting. So when you pull back, has your weight shifted back behind the knee, more towards the shin? Or can you pull and shift, feel the load on the front of your knees more? And that moves the center of gravity more.
Yeah, that's anterior, like even doing the salute in knees. I love that feeling.
Your body will activate, a whole body activation will happen. And that's what Joseph Pilates, I believe, wanted to have, right? So, when you can, I call it the sweet spot, right? You hit that sweet spot, and that's why you get the lift. You don't artificially go, elongate. You see what I'm doing? I can't breathe. Like, I'm elongating, okay? If I feel my whole body, like chest expansion is a great example, and my center of gravity is moving forward, that's in my sacrum, and I'm loading the front of my knees, and I'm pulling against that resistance, which is adding load to my body, the response and the self-organizing part of me becomes that, which is what we want when we say elongation. Yeah. So elongation is another word that's off the list.
Yeah. Okay. We've been playing with that in Polestar. We had the axial elongation, and we have now gone to
even axial. I'm sorry, I'm going to really challenge you.
I'm saying we're going away from it. That's what I'm saying. We coined the phrase pretty heavily about 30 years ago of axial elongation, and we've been moving away from terms like that because you said exactly what we feel when we go too far that way, which I can't breathe, or it's like it's not natural. And it's the same thing of doing any kind of volitional cueing of hollowing the abdominals or pulling the belly in or lifting the pelvic floor or squeezing your glutes. That still is very common in the cueing language and culture of Pilates. That leads to this question that's up. It's an anonymous attendee, but the question is fantastic. And I think this is what we're hoping to influence today, both Madeline and I, is to...
Oh, I just did that.
You just did it. I know. That's what I was saying.
I didn't even read that states into it. But you know, if you want to try something real quick, I mean, it's super easy. It's if everybody stands up. You know, I don't know if you can see me. I'm in my shorts here. See the beach? Isn't it beautiful?
I'm going to stand up, but you're going to see my belly.
Yeah, but if you stand, I think you can see me. I didn't test this out. Well, you're not going to see my head so much. Let's see. But just stand, and then I want you just to shift. Just think of foot loading, right? So when you're standing, okay, if I load, see my back's a little like I've been sitting in a flexion too much. But if you get your weight, feel your feet, and then go to the back of your heel and feel how your body's responding, right? My quads are engaged. I'm engaged because I'm going to fall over, right? Your body's kind of basically wanting to not fall. So, and then if I shift my foot load to the front of my heel, what's happening now? Well, I actually felt my sacrum go forward. My center of gravity is going with my foot. And then if I keep going, to the tips of my toes, like to the forefoot, what's happening in my acetabular-femoral joints here, and what's happening in my back? Well, I'm starting to go into extension. And what about my good old glutes here? Well, guess what? They activated, because if they didn't, I would fall on my face, and then you would take your step. Yeah. So to transfer your weight, you load your feet from back through the foot, and then that step forward.
And you and I were playing with this a little bit too, of just going side to side, just little tiny shifts.
It's all in the loading. So that's the whole thing about cueing too, is bringing the person's. We were talking about this, which I said to you, how many hours do we have to talk? Yeah. So it's also the sensory. It's the sensory feedback to the client. So I mean, I had someone who had she fell and broke her femur after a hip replacement. Anyways, her gait's really kind of messed up, and she just really couldn't ground her side of her leg that she injured because she was standing on the other leg so much, right? So I said, do you have anything at home that's kind of rough and something that you could feel it's scratchy or whatever? And she had a loofah. So she ran to the bathroom, grabbed a flat loofah, not a round one. And then I had her stand on it to stand up on the loofah, and she stood there, and she was able to like really ground her leg because she could feel the sensory input of the loofah on her foot. And then I was able to get her to actually laterally shift to the right and come back. I was just trying to get her to feel something in her hip that she had injured. Right. She was recovered. I mean, she'd been healed for 2 months or so. I mean, it's not broken anymore. But anyway, it's just like, how do you bring that back? So to me, that's what I've been taking away, as opposed to talking about like anatomy and fascia, you know, and all of that, and how each of us are really unique movers. So there is no correcting, no right or wrong. You know, it's how the body responds and how you activate it. You look at it. What's your strategy for movement, right? And how can you look at that strategy and then go, I think I could help you be a little more efficient. Okay, it's not correcting, but can we be more efficient? So therefore, I won't have a torn labrum in my hip when I'm 50, because my tissues are drying out, and I've always had a pronated foot, an internally rotated valgus knee, and my weight was always distributed in a way that was putting the force, the load on that labrum, and then I extend my hip, and bing, it goes, because you're kind of getting old and dried up. So it's kind of
thinking of some take homes from today. You know, it's like. To me, there's some really powerful insights that we've discussed today and that you've shared, Madeline. I think, you know, and we've certainly shifted the way we look at movement, even in our teaching, of looking more for the internal feedback. What do you feel? What do you observe? Not being a right or wrong, right? That's a really important one, that we don't make it right or wrong. And I do love the concept of efficiency. If we can provide anything, the research shows that, you know, if your posture deviation there's no correlation with posture deviation and pathology. So a lot of times we want to put, if you're a rounded back posture, you're going to have this type of pathology. If you have this But when it comes to movement quality, really the quality is about efficiency and pleasure and joy in movement. And I think if there's one thing we could take home from today is whole body movement. Everything's moving, whole mind, whole body. Just what Joe, I mean, that is a great fundamental thing that Joe had from the very beginning, was whole body movement. And, here we dissected it and tore it apart and tried to isolate things with what the culture was from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s on. And now we're realizing, the new models that we're starting to use. And again, remember what we said about models, but the idea of how we can look at whole body movement. We can look at internal feedback, what are they feeling, and the idea of increasing efficiency. I think if we could take those three things home today, Madeline, I think that would be, a great step forward of understanding that we can break out of some of the language that our culture has been using and move into some more holistic, explorative, internal feedback. And the good thing about that I see is the individual has much greater retention when they're feeling what their body's saying to them, when they can hear it. And if we can bring that kind of awareness to somebody, we won the game, right? I mean, that's...
Yeah, I have this thing about, like, I sometimes say, don't ask a client how they feel. Okay, because what they might feel could be just not connected to what it is that they're doing, that I can see that they're doing. I don't know if that makes sense.
What would you ask?
Like for instance, if I get them to activate, I get them to shift, and I see, that lateral shift, and I see that there's this engagement, and I say, oh, can you feel that? Can you feel that? Because I'm trying to get you to, like, if you can say you can feel it, then you will always remember it. And they're like, no, can't feel it. I'm like, but can you feel that whole lateral hip? Look, it's just on fire. It's like, and they're like, nope. So it's giving them a sensation and a feeling. So like standing on a loofah, or putting your hand there,
shifting the load,
push against
somewhere.
me.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You're trying to get them to have the proprioception, or the response of, can you feel this? Like, are you feeling that? Because I'm giving you stimulation. You have to wake it up,
Yeah.
So it's a little different than just saying, well, how do you feel, or how does it feel to you?
And it's not how do you feel, but it is,
Okay.
if we're creating the change in an organization of a movement by, like you did with the loofah, or like we might do with, moving the pelvis in a different position, or shifting the weight a different way, or reorganizing to gravity in a different way. Same movement, but maybe we change the orientation. Our goal is to get them to have heightened consciousness and awareness of their body in space, just to be able to feel what we're looking at, right? So if they can understand what it feels like, what sitting does to them when they go for a walk, like how does sitting impact their walking? You just said it. You went from sitting and you're like, oh my gosh, I've been sitting in flex position. So shifting weight and standing, I can feel that. And I think that when we look at, and Mark Harrison had some good questions here about the idea of posture, right? So we look at somebody that comes to us with slump posture. What I take away from today's discussion is thinking more of, somebody who has really rigid slump posture is not going to feel better with us trying to push them into an actually elongated posture. It's going to be uncomfortable in their tissues. But the idea of over time, them having a sense of becoming more and more efficient probably is going to look like they have better posture. I think
I totally agree.
We keep trying to make it go the other way. Like, if I fix your posture, you're going to be more efficient. If we teach efficiency, their posture is going to get better.
Right. Well, their posture is their posture.
Yeah.
And they're just moving more efficiently, and they'll
that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Language.
Yeah. Very good.
All right. Well, we are coming up at the end of time, and I wanted to make sure we read that quote one more time. Before we do that, Madeline, what would you like to share with the audience, just as sort of your closing remarks, and then we'll read that quote and we'll finish on those great words and we'll say goodbye to everybody.
Yeah, I would say that it's all a process, and we shouldn't really get too attached. Practice non-attachment to the information, but look at it from a perspective of what you believe. And then you, as a teacher, will teach from your place of your belief system, as long as you know that it's yours and that you're not following someone's model, because that's what you were taught and this is how it should be done. But to be a little bit more expansive, look at it, question the model. Why not? Right? And then see how that works, and come study with me.
And that's a maturation. Yeah, that's a maturation process, and you should definitely take advantage of anywhere that Madeline's teaching. That's a maturation process in the work, right? So a lot of times when we are teaching beginners, right, and we've been working on this of having an explorative introduction to movement rather than authoritative introduction to movement. So what does an explorative introduction to movement look like versus us telling them what movement is, right? But then when they come out of an education program, almost in any science or any kind of practice, there are rules that they follow the rules. And I think your comment, Madeline, is really important as you become a competent practitioner in anything that you're doing. Part of the competency is asking that question. It's asking the question because you learn the trade, but then we have to ask ourselves, and that's why I've shared that story before. Like after I had gone through a lot of different Pilates trainings with different schools and different, and Madeline and I probably studied with. I think we were together with Eve Gentry at one time or something in a workshop or something. Mm-hmm. But the point being is that I went back and I started going through all the Pilates movement as different systems of my body for myself. So I knew what I was trying to interpret. What was really going on in the digestive system or in the nervous system or in the tegumentary system while I was going through these same exercises, I wanted to know. And I think that's the point where you learn a system and then you mature into ability to ask those questions, because the things that I was being told didn't make sense to me in my way of looking at it. And so I continue to challenge it. So how do I teach? I teach off of the way that I experienced it and how I believe it's going to be. And I think we all do that, right? But the maturation of a practitioner is one who is asking those questions. If we don't ask those questions, if we don't challenge the beliefs, we will not evolve in the future culture of movement.
Exactly. And I think in life, I don't know why I was put on this planet to always question, but I always have. Always. Well, I don't know why.
Some people see it as being a pain in the ass, and others people see it as being super enlightening.
Believe me, I've had a few people. Some people have called me that. Believe me.
Oh yeah, no, you get it. It's like, but it's that challenge, and it's the challenge that leads us to looking for, other solutions, and we would not be who we are without that.
One of the first things Buddha said was question everything I say. It's one of the first things he said.
Yeah.
And I felt so confirmed when I heard that from a Buddhist monk who told that to me. And I was like, thank you. So that's just question everything. Do your research.
Perfect.
Be your own person. But here's John Sharkey's quote
with
again.
A quote. Great.
It's the language of biotensecurity is the language of soft matter physics. It is tension and compression with continuity. The premise of biotensecurity is nonlinear, continuous matter that is self-generated, self-organizing, self-stressing, hierarchical, low-distributing, and low-energy consuming. There are no shear moments, no bending moments, no levers, no joints.
Love it. We're gonna finish on that. We're gonna finish on that. We will have some of these things in the post-production. Madeline, can't thank you enough. Thank you very much. If you're interested on things, we'll give you links to what Madeline's up and doing, and you can find out where she's teaching. Obviously, in Polestar, we have a number of exciting events coming up. Victor's going to be with us here doing his connector this weekend at the farm. So that'll be fun. And we just want everybody, we just want everybody to remember, first and foremost, above all things, be kind and have a wonderful week. Thank you, Madeline. Appreciate you. Appreciate your work in the profession.
Thank you. Adios.
Ciao, ciao.